Did you like it?
Hello, everybody. My name is Lee Hibbard. I'm from the Council of Europe, and I'd like to welcome you to this workshop on critical internet literacy. As you see, we have lots of people on the front, more people almost than in the seats there. So we're not going to have I don't think we're going to, I've done a few of these things. I don't think we're going to have a proper, formatted workshop with lots of people speaking in panels for long speeches, etc. We're going to try to, you are really going to be the stars of this discussion. I'd really like to heavily rely on your input and maybe their reactions. They will give some comments, we'll have some short interventions, but please, I would really like to, I'll be trying to walk around and trying to bring you into the discussion. I'd really like to change the dialogue, to make it a dialogue, a conversation with you, because we talk about critical internet literacy. We talk about media literacy in the past, we talk about media and information literacy, we talk about digital literacy, and now we're talking about critical internet literacy, which is, I think, another step. And so far, what I've heard is that in many ways we're going much, with the internet and how our lives are, we're going much further and deeper into what we need to know, dealing with fake news, etc. We have lots and lots of challenges ahead, whether we be whichever stakeholder group we talk about, whether we're technical, we need to train people, we need to make them literate. I have colleagues back in Strasbourg who are dealing with competencies to do with digital competencies, and they talk about learning and creativity. They talk about active participation, access and inclusiveness, health and well-being, e-presence and communications, privacy and security, rights and responsibilities, ethics and empathy, media and information literacy, and also consumer awareness, which is much more than the literacy to be safe or to be private or to be secure online. I think for many people, literacy and education and skills has been about, it's a negative thing, needing to be safe, your children, etc., etc. But now this digital transformation that we're undergoing, we talk about digital transformation of oneself, the future of jobs, etc. It's much more than that, I think. And I think you can agree with that, and I will stop talking. So we have lots of people here. I will come to them. We'll break this down to 3 blocks, as in the agenda, and there'll be 3 blocks. One block is what is critical about internet and the need to be literate online, what is critical. We have a few speakers there. We have a second block on good practice, and there are lots of people who have done lots of good things in their different countries, and I'd like them to step up and say something, but short. And then we're going to have a way forward. We're going to look at the way forward. So we're going to break it into 3 parts, and the way forward will be looking to what we can do together or separately actionable things. And we have a rapporteur, Davina Frau-Meggs, who will be wrapping up. And on that point, she's going to give us a few words of context, because Davina was one of the people that created this workshop, pushed this workshop forward. So some context from her, and then she'll come in at the end of the session. So please, Davina.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you, all participants and participants, because we are very much in what Lee was talking about. It's a peer participatory approach, and we are all very legitimate about these issues. So I'm going to start with something I never thought I would say. Thank you, Trump. Thank you for fake news. Why? Oops, I'm too close to the speakers, and this is a media literacy that I should remember. Because we are in times of crisis about the internet, about how to approach it. Media literacy is back on the forefront. It had been sidelined by topics such as security, such as safety, such as coding, new competencies that are more technical. But we realize, again, that there is a need for values, there's a need for content, there's a need for mastery, there's a need for critical thinking, and this is what we are here about, how to assess that. I wanted to share with you the results of this book that I've just published that compares public policies in media and information literacy in Europe. And the results are basically very good. Europe has an abundance of resources, of good practices, and you'll hear some of them here. Europe has an abundance of training. Europe has an abundance of actors who participate in media and information literacy. But where are we going? It's all extremely scattered. There is no governance of media and information literacy, the way we are still striving also for a governance of internet. And what I would like to propose to you is that it's the same fight. Internet governance, media and information literacy governance are the same fight. It's about how we want to shape the future of the internet. We as users, we as citizens. And so the question is to push as much as we can here and beyond the agenda, the research agenda, the policy agenda, the different stakeholders' agenda in the same direction in the future. We are at a moment where, because of the news, we are reaching a new maturity about internet, technically, but also as a human group. So how do we think about it together? How do we push with the best interest of young people? How do we push the internet in a direction that we can be proud of? So this is just the little aim of this workshop. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Davina. Okay, our first block is what is critical internet literacy. And before we go to Kimmo, Vincent, and Indrek, which I will introduce you to very shortly, I'd like to open the floor, or to get you ready to maybe to contribute to this. I mean, you know, you have your own ideas. Literacy is a very soft topic. We all agree that it's important. We all agree we need education. But I'd like to know what you think. Do you have any views on what you've heard, or where you want literacy to go, what you need for the future in terms of skills and competencies and education, formal education for your children, non-formal education for your work and for other things? I mean, do you have any views? So I'd like you to really come into the discussion. I'm going to hang around here, and then I'm going to look at my colleagues on the panel there, and they will come in now. But I'm really wish to have a dialogue. This is not a formal panel setting, so I'd really like a conversation. So we have Kimmo Aulakki from the Ministry of Education and Culture of Finland. We have Vincent Bonnet from the EBLIDA, the European Bureau of Library Information and Documentation Associations. And we have Indrek Ibrus from the Tallinn University here in lovely Tallinn. I'll start with Kimmo, but very briefly, Kimmo, then Vincent, then Indrek. What is critical about internet and literacy regarding the internet, please?
Thanks, Lee. Before trying to answer that and gazing into the crystal ball to see the future, I take a quick look into the past. Because about until 600 years ago, people, all of us, not us, but them, were confined to the kind of immediate families and communities. Why 600 years ago? Because in 1439, Gutenberg invented printing press, which led to the birth of press, newspapers. And that process gradually, of course, widened the life spheres of people to thousands and gradually to millions. Radio, television further expanded that a lot. But what we see today is that 3.65 billion people are connected to the internet. So basically half of the world's population, which means that in principle, 3.65 billion people can be directly in contact with each other. And it has led to the formation of different communities, tribes, especially in social media. Of course, such an expansion of this communication and an exchange is most welcome. But I think that what we have entered now is definitely uncharted waters. What I mean by that is that information technology allows for the collection of an enormous amount of information, of our preferences, of our consumption online. Basically everything we do online is being recorded. And this big data that is being collected is also being analyzed by the companies operating the main social media and other internet platforms. And they use that information not only to sell to advertisers, but to know more about us than we could ever imagine. And consequently, when it comes to literacy, which meant originally that you were able to read and write to function, to be an active citizen, And that notion, of course, is still relevant, but it was succeeded by media literacy, still very much part of what we do in the ministry, I guess in every European country. But even that seems to be too narrow. And now we are talking about critical internet literacy, which to me means skills and competencies to also understand what kind of information is collected of us, how this big data is used to come up with algorithms that more or less determine what is being offered to us, who does that, how and why.
Thank you very much. Now, coming to Vincent, the word critical is also about, it refers to two things, about the critical nature of where we are and what we need to do, and also the fact that we need to be critical in our analysis of what we receive online. So I guess it has a double meaning. Vincent, what's your take on critical internet literacy from a library perspective, please?
So from a library perspective, I will use a sentence, quote from James Helmborg, who is a librarian from the Iowa University, so from the US. And basically about critical, he said that once they recognized the connection between power and literacy, societies found they could manipulate literacy levels to distribute power. Literacy has always been connected to power and to social class, and it has been intentionally deployed by society to manage these categories and functions. That's the end of the quote. So I found interesting the link between manipulation, literacy, and power, as it talks to us about the question of fake news and alternative facts and all these questions that we are dealing with at the moment. And I guess that critical for us, and being critical, means that it is the ability to be free from manipulation and aware of what is happening and how the internet is regulated and how individuals can manage their own rights and know what they're doing by using all these technological tools. And from a library perspective, we have already charters that are created in some countries that protect individual rights and that insist on the fact that the information that are available should be open and reliable. We have also library giving trainings in different countries, and we have been collecting data on the fact that actually 82% of the population in Europe are following training, lifelong learning training in libraries. So there is a big outreach of libraries there to help out in really make a critical internet literacy a reality.
Thank you very much, Vincent. Indrek, and I really want you to come up to the microphone, or I have a roaming microphone, and we also have people on remote that should come into the discussion too. Please come and have a conversation with us. Indrek, is there any tension? We're all singing the same song regarding literacy and education. No one will dispute that, and the fact that it's critical. No one will dispute that. Is there any tension? What's your take on critical internet literacy?
Oh, hello. Firstly, thank you, Vincent, for this kind of systematic definition of how could we understand critical internet literacy. And next to it, I would start out by an apology. Because while I work in the university, I'm not actually a literacy researcher as well. I'm a critical media production researcher. This is what I do. However, in this context, you mentioned that people need to really understand how the media and the internet industries are regulated. Next to it, I think what the critical really means is really understand when people face content, people face services, to really understand why are these services, texts, content there. And this really means understanding how the industry works. What are the rationales? What are the practices? What are the operations like? And in this sense, I'm making my job as a production researcher more important, also relevant for the literacy. But in terms of regulation, this really means the question how to make these production processes more transparent for the general audiences. And then next to it, what kind of questions do we as critical audiences really should be asking on an everyday basis? Just before the lunch, I was attending the panel on copyright here. And while I really feel of these people asking the critical questions and demanding more freedom with regard to remix practice, which is also definitely part of the critical literacy and critical internet skills, what I sense there is kind of the feel for empathy towards the journalism, that kind of media industry. Like, yes, we need to have more freedom, but what happens to the media industry then? Just yesterday, I trained journalists in the university, and the company named Delphi is now widely known in Europe and the rest of the world. We have heard the court case Delphi versus Estonia. But I can introduce another little bit of information I heard yesterday. Why are our graduates from university finding really easy to go and work for Delphi in Estonia? It is because Delphi can only afford journalists paying minimum pay. They are really struggling financially. And then the next sort of what we can infer from this is that, you know, when we start thinking about the fake news and all that, is that this is part of the formula. They don't do well, and there's very little in the small market of Estonia when it comes to media industry. There's simply no power of producing truthful content as much as there maybe should be the case. Therefore, you know, putting two things together, copyright, content industry struggling, etc., the literacy issue emerges as a kind of common ground, something they can build their alliances around. Because as you just put a few minutes ago, literacy is something we all understand that is uncontroversial when it comes to this is how we improve things. And therefore, we can bring both of the parties on board here. Why are we all here is that we have been also working on the Council of Europe recommendation when it comes to big data for culture and internet literacy. And a very interesting point for me in there is what we have defined as the right to be inscrutable, which is a big thing, to give to all of the internet users the right to really sort of step out of the game, saying we don't want that algorithm designing our media menu, something that Kim already mentioned. It is almost a binary choice, yes or no. But in some sense, it is so principled, so important. If we make all of the internet users to think about this one single step, I think this is a big educational threshold to start understand each one of us what is media doing us, how are they designing our media menus, and why are they maybe doing this also. So this is where I finish my.
Thank you. I mean, there are other colleagues on the panel who can come into the discussion, of course, so please feel free. But I'm still standing here, and I'm still walking among you to know whether you have any comments. I mean, can I ask you, do you think it's urgent? Is there a sense of urgency regarding how you behave online or how others behave online? Are you worried about, is it undisputed that there's no problem with, is there any problems with literacy or education? Do you feel that it's okay? Are you bothered? Or is there a sense of urgency in your countries, in your stakeholder groups, in your families and friends? Is it okay? I mean, I asked it to the colleagues on the panel too, but do you have any comments? I mean, do you want to come in on this? I'd really like you to put your hand up or take the mic. Don't be shy. You're here because literacy is important. I know I'm looking at my colleagues who deal with literacy regarding no hate speech. There's no pressure, Menno, but also other people too. I mean, you know, informing the public about no hate speech is very important. Very briefly.
No, but it's worth adding to the discussion or to reflect also on this. I mean, in the opening statement was already brought that internet media literacy or internet literacy, which I think is to take the media out is a good point. Internet literacy, it's much broader than just safety of children online or to understand how to express ourselves. I mean, I work for the campaign, I coordinate the campaign against hate speech. So for us, it's become very clear that we need to educate and raise awareness about your behavior online and the way you express. But this comes with values, and values related to, okay, what does it mean to do human rights or to do democracy in the online space? So that for us, this paradigm is very clear, that it's not only about the technical skills, but it's also very much on the choices that you make on using them or not. I mean, there's also an element of not using it. So this is one point. So I'm very happy that the internet literacy is now seen as a much broader package, which covers many aspects. So I think that's very good. My question is, can we, or in the educational approach that we choose, can we also explore ways of creating safe spaces for practice? Because many young people that I come across, or the youth workers that I work with, say lots of the kids learn by doing. And that's fine if it's in a classroom or in the school setting, etc. But learning by doing on the internet is often not an isolated safe space. So there's here maybe we should actually create spaces for learning by doing, which is a very important way of learning, non-formal or informal learning. Maybe we can explore this. How can we create areas where people can go trial and error without having long-term consequences or being exposed? Because kids need to sometimes have a bit of feedback from their peers, and there's all these things are going on that can be very harsh. And if this can be created in a safe environment, that would be very good. So maybe that's something to explore, how we can create that.
Thank you, Menno. So I'm going to come back to the people on the panel to respond a little bit. We have 10 minutes or so on this block. It's funny how we always go towards the obvious choices, fake news, like content issues. For me, it's about Internet of Things, about big data, about the collection of your data, whether that be personal data or not data which is not attributed to you as a data subject, but which can then be re-identified about you later on, and which can then be used to profile you, for example. So that is becoming more and more and more important. Devices in your home will be collecting more and more information about you, what you eat, how these devices interact with you, maybe with other people. I mean, there are already televisions out there which, scan your eyes as you look across the screen. Some already listen to the conversations. These are devices in your home. The right to private and family life, the right to be left alone, the right to be private, to think and to be informed in the privacy of your own home. Are we literate in that sense? Do we have the ability to understand, to make choices to turn it off? So I'd like to come to you, the panelists. Do you have any comments on this? What is critical? And do you agree with me, or do you want to answer the question of Menno in this regard? Anybody? Siobhan, please. Montgomery from the Council of Europe.
Yep, I think it's really important for the human rights to be a strong part of this critical internet literacy. And we all talk about human rights, but people really have to know what is meant by human rights. It should become second nature. Children, adults, older people. Everyone should really understand what having a human rights perspective actually means. Equality, respect for diversity, etc. I feel that we've created, and when I was a kid, I used to watch Batman and Robin a lot, and there was always a baddie, and these baddies always wanted to control the world. And ironically, or rather scarily, we have created a world with internet in which some people are trying to control the world, as we have seen recently with the elections in the UK, the referendum, and the Trump elections. I think it's really important for the private sector to work along with the public sector, for the public sector to understand their concerns and for them to understand our concerns. And I think this is really the way forward, that the public must work hand in hand with the private. I work on the digital platform on the impact of digitalization on culture, and I must say that we always have problems trying to contact the private sector. So I think we've found it very, very difficult getting contact with Google, and I just wonder how many people from the private sector today are here in this room. And I think there needs to be more connection, more communication between the public and the private.
Thank you, Siobhan. Vincent, did you want to come in? Then Marisol from the European Commission.
I wanted just to answer about the question of learning by doing, and I think that there is a trend in libraries now that the new model of library is developing with the people, and there is a co-development of what are the services and what people expect. And actually, when you look back into the Netherlands a few years ago, where there have been a project in EuroDIG, so it's a library for the children. It was called Library of the 100 Talents, and before the new library building was started, they asked the children, what do you want in this library and how do you see the services? And they basically asked for the library to be a safe space and also a space where you can play and learn by doing. And I think that if we can broaden this also into the internet, then, and it's already happening in some of the new libraries, we can provide actually new type of content and new kind of awareness for the children, the grown-ups, and the elderly about what they're doing, what they can do online.
Thank you very much. Marisol Perez, first of all, from the European Commission, and then our friend Pascal from CNIL.
So yes, I would like to give 2 comments. First, to what is critical.
Yeah.
Yes, I have some data from Ofcom, which is the regulator in the UK, and they've been doing for years studies on media habits of people. So for me, it's one of the best researchers in Europe. So they came with the result that 1 out of 4 European, or no, there was British people, think that when they do a Google research, what they get is accurate and has it verified. So it's 1 out of 4. So this is data which is really, really hard. And the second, they did another test about ability of people to recognize advertising on a Google search. So this little yellow box AD. So 40% of the people are not able to recognize ads on a search engine. So they think that this AD is the best result or is a recommendation. So this is hard data. And we are all of us confident users of internet, but we are not savvy users. And it's not only for children, it's for all generations, people. So this is very critical and it's very urgent. And then there was also the point about the involvement of the private sector. So we have, in November last year, a colloquium on fundamental rights, and Google and Facebook were there. And the European Commission committed itself, and is Britain, to continue a dialogue on media literacy with digital intermediaries such as Facebook, Twitter, and Google. The dialogue will aim to identify actions and programs to provide citizens with knowledge and understanding of the functioning of social media, because they provide the services, they make big benefits, and they have big responsibilities. And they are big players with a big capacity to have impact. So far, we've been contacted by Facebook, and they are putting in place a media literacy project. I don't know if there is anybody from Facebook here that could elaborate, and it would be interesting if there are people from Google that could also explain, because as the point you made is very, very important. They are also part of the solution, and they can escalate the solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Before coming to Pascal Serrier from the CNIL in France, I mean, Piers O'Donoghue from the European Commission said this morning that 1 in 2 Europeans, a recent study, I think, limited their internet activity because they were fearful of issues of privacy or security, so they were not confident to properly use the internet. So there is fear there on the other side. It's not, I don't know how much confidence is there, so I put that there. And also he talks, and I know that the Roberto Viola, the Director General of the DG Connect, he talks about an internet of humans. We're talking a lot these days about human-centric internet and for the future. So that must mean education and learning and literacy. So Pascal Serrier from the CNIL, please.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to react to the suggestion of learning by doing on the internet, because as data protection authorities, I'm talking on behalf of the French CNIL and other international data protection authorities, we have experienced some new approach which is not so far from learning by doing. We have launched a competition, a nationwide competition, aimed to very young people, but open for candidates of students from 18 to 25. And we asked these students to learn and to provide content, best practices to the younger generation, how to be safe on the net. And this is a third year we have developed this initiative with a collective of actors involved in digital education. And we find it is much better than developing individually new contents on behalf of regulatory authority. Sometimes it can be credible, but in situation on the spot, we think that intergenerational dialogue and by the peers is not so far from learning by doing. And we think that educators have also a very relevant role to play in helping developing in this direction education and literacy.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm still walking, I still have a microphone in my hand, and I'm still looking at you. So I'd really like you to come into the conversation. We have the last 5-10 minutes on this block on what is critical. So I'd really like you to think about, and maybe come up to the microphone and talk. Stephen from IFLA, please.
Thank you very much. So it's almost just to echo a couple of points. I think the key one is really, I think, about choice, about knowing what decisions you're taking. As it's a perfectly legitimate choice to give away your data in exchange for a free service, as long as you know what you're doing. And I think it's the explaining what you're doing that's key. I think the points that you made about the role of educators and others and librarians and people who can come and use the library as a platform for doing this is really useful. I think we've seen broadly that the little cookies box on websites in the EU, there's already talk of getting rid of it after a relatively short period of time. That's one way of trying to do it. I think experimenting with how do you actually get people to understand what the risks are and how it could change them if things don't work properly is going to be important. And that requires people who know their communities. Cue the plug for libraries.
Okay, thank you. Yves Mathieu from Mission Publique. What would you like to say on this briefly? Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to, good afternoon. I would like to see things from a bit further. So we talk about internet literacy, but the same question for the citizen is about the climate literacy. The same question is about ocean literacy. And if you take the seat of an ordinary citizen, there is much to learn now. And what is common to all these systems is the complexity. We all belong to a global society, and we need to learn the complexity of the society, but not only for the internet. It's the same for all the big challenges that we all face together. And so the question is, are we going to add demands to the citizen to learn internet, then to learn the oceans, then to learn the climate? I mean, they're going to do that during their nights and their days. It's an endless system. So what can we do in the system so that the people understand the complexity and understand their role as citizens in a complex system? So there are probably some possibilities. And one of my friends, who is the founders of the Institute of Desirable Future in France, he suggests that as today, all the citizens of the planet, when they go to primary school, they have lessons of history. And we should give lessons of future to every citizen. Because if in the curriculum we learn the people how to learn the future and to get ready to the future, then we will create a mindset where the people understand the complexity of the society and when they are in a position to take the right decision. I will stop by adding one comment. It's about the climate. Much has been done to share the issue of climate with the 7 billion people living on the planet. We know that one thing does not work. It's to frighten the people. When you frighten the people, you close them and you stop their capacity to act. What works is empower them and to give them a positive message on, yes, this is a problem, and yes, we can solve the problem. And if you see the next movie of Al Gore on climate, it's about that. The problem is huge, and we can solve it. So I think that for the internet, it's the same. If we do like the UK Prime Minister, yesterday, threatening the people by saying we need to close the internet because it's due to the internet the problem. I showed on the message, it was probably not exactly that. We're not going to provoke any positive reaction. If we want them to trust the system, we need to empower them and show them that, yes, we can solve the problem.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, Rachel, we're going to come to you very shortly so we can build that in. It's quite clear that I have the sense, Davina, that we link literacy to negative things often. It's always about problems that we react, but it isn't, is it? It's, of course, it's about positive things too. It's not a negative approach to literacy that we should be left with in terms of this discussion. Are there any comments before we finish this block and before we carry on? Anybody want to come up? No? You're looking at me? Okay, fine.
I want to make a comment.
Yes,
because
please.
you talked about literacy, and well, there's internet and media literacy challenges traditional literacy. That's one of the reasons it finds a very hard time entering the mindset of curricula decided in the 19th century. There's a lot of resistance to media literacy. Everybody says it's obvious. I wish it were. It's not in the traditional educational system. The learning by doing strategies are extremely resilient, are resisted by what I call learning by affiliation. You learn by rote what you have been taught and what teachers have been taught themselves, which is still very much the model. So yes, we need media literacy, and it is not obvious to put it in place in the traditional system. And that's a real open question, real tensions there.
Okay, thank you. So I take it in this room we're all literate, we're all critical, we click on the internet and we know exactly what we're doing, where we're going, what choices we make. We know all the terms and conditions of service, we know what they mean, how they should be interpreted in a legal context, and we know what choices we can make. So I'm really pleased about that fact in this room. Thank you. Sorry, I'm being a bit silly. Excuse me. Right, we'll come to the second block. We have a block on best practices, good practice. What has worked? Davina has mentioned that let's say the media literacy or the media and information literacy or the internet literacy landscape is very sort of messy. There's lots of initiatives. There is some evidence-based work out there which gives statistics, as has been mentioned, and there are other things too. There's talk about an observatory on literacy, collecting what we have and making sense of it. I'd like to hear some good examples. So we have Rachel Pollock, Ishu, is that right? From UNESCO. And you have lots of nice things to say about UNESCO's work. After that, we have Pascal Serrier again from CNIL, the French body dealing with data protection and other things like that. And then we have Corina Caligaru, who is the Moldovan ambassador in the Council of Europe dealing with internet governance issues with the other governments of the member states. So Rachel, please first.
Yes, thank you. So I have 5 points to make, which I'll squeeze into 3 to 5 minutes. Stop me when I can.
I'll stop you.
Just building on this first block about defining critical internet literacies, UNESCO calls this media and information literacy. Davina is our UNESCO chair and media information, you can tell the full title. But basically our message is not to get too hung up on the terminology that often people are talking about digital literacy, internet literacy, media literacy, and referring more or less to the same things. And we should focus on the competencies. And so here I think it's really about critical thinking. Our theme for this year's World Press Freedom Day was critical minds for critical times. And we can see media and information literacy is an answer to many of the problems we're facing today. Of course, we mentioned fake news and radicalization, but to empower individuals of all ages with the critical thinking skills and the values of global citizenship to build more peaceful societies. So the first is not to focus on terminology, but on competencies. Then also we need a multi-stakeholder approach. And so as it was mentioned, there are a lot of different initiatives, a very fragmented landscape. And it's clear that not any one actor alone can find a solution, and so we have to bring together different ministries of education, of culture, civil society groups, researchers, and there I think we can take a model from the internet governance world and apply it to media and information literacy. Next, to look for innovative practices. So at UNESCO, we have developed a series of MOOCs, of multi-open online courses. on media and information literacies. We also have a new program called Mill Clicks, which is about social media. And the idea is to make learning these literacies fun and interactive, to build it into the social media platforms themselves through games and other activities. And then we have an idea of mill expansion. And so that's of introducing opportunities for media and information literacy in the built environment. For example, at a bus stop, while you're waiting for the bus to arrive, to have some kind of engaging content. And then finally, to look at partnerships. And so at UNESCO, we've initiated the GAP Mill, which is the Global Alliance for Partnerships and Media and Information Literacy. I know there are more than 80 members, maybe Davina can tell the exact number. But we really encourage all of you to join this movement and to share good practices and find joint solutions.
Well, Rachel, who are you targeting with these activities? Who's the public?
Well,
everybody, or is it particular groups of the public?
Yeah, no, so this is really, MIL, Media and Information Literacy, is not only for children, so it certainly should be part of formal education systems, and so then, for example, developing curricula for ministries of education and policymakers. But we believe that this is a lifelong process of learning, and so it doesn't stop when you, and so as UNESCO, we have a universal reach, and so it's the citizens of the world are the target audience. But of course, to go through that ultimate end user, we work with key partners, and so again, from ministries, civil society organizations, researchers. But these are competencies and skills that everyone needs.
Okay, thank you. Pascal Serrier, are French people literate on internet, Pascal? Sorry? Are French people literate on the internet?
Yeah.
Okay, tell us more.
No, of course, thank you, Lee. Maybe you might be surprised to see our data protection authorities here taking part to such a workshop, because we are known as regulatory authorities and enforcement authorities. But we have one of our missions is also to provide advice right early in the development of proceedings. And that's why we have strongly adhered a few years ago to a new approach, which could be shared, as Rachel said, as a multi-stakeholders approach, because we cannot do everything only by our own and not only with data protection regulation. We know this is a necessary framework. The new GDPR will get into application in 1 year, but we have to also provide advice and some contents to schools, to ministries of education, to non-formal educators as well. So that's why we have, to illustrate this approach, we have created 3 years ago a multi-stakeholders approach called a Collective for Digital Education, grouping actors. Now there are some 60 actors from the world of education, the world of research, from civil society, from also foundations, and we provide the same message, and we are trying to use individual networks to share the same content and also the same message to the public. And we have considered young people were one of the priority public to train. The second target we have included in our initiative, in our actions, are the Ministry of Education. And here I'm talking about formal education. For instance, the CNIL, but I know many of our counterparts in the world, not only in Europe, have also concluded agreement or different kind of partnerships with ministries of education. And here at the CNIL, typically, we develop some training for teachers, because we consider it's obvious that there is a lack of training of teachers in privacy skills and in digital skills at large. That's why we provide some training to trainers as well. We have also developed some content for the official, how to say, the database and the official libraries they may provide to the teachers. We have developed some new concept which under the form of a competitive framework on privacy and data protection issues. This didn't exist yet. There are so many competencies framework in different matters, and here we have developed the main key competencies and skills which need to be encompassed by the young people and by teachers as well, because this is also intended to teachers. So these are a few examples of the contribution made by data protection communities at large in the processing of developing competencies to young people, to children, and also to their staff.
Thank you, Pascal. Before passing the mic to Karina, can I ask you, we talked about, well, we're all here because it's multi-stakeholder, because we know that the governance of the internet is multi-stakeholder. It's not just governments, it's not just one group, it's a shared approach. We know that. So in your work in France, for example, I mean, you're working with educators in target groups, with education ministries, etc. Are there any, I mean, is it multi-stakeholder? I mean, do you invite companies into that discussion, or other stakeholders from the technical communities, or is it just CNIL and one or two, education professionals and students, or is it more broad? I mean, what I'm trying to say is that are there any, it's pretty safe, on safe ground with that sort of education approach, but we talked about companies earlier, and they're not being in the room. Are they in the room in CNIL with the work that you do?
Companies not directly, but the foundations of some companies have joined our group. For example, the Free Foundation has recently joined our group, but industry is only one part of the stakeholders, because it's important for us to have also civil society, parents, representation, and such stakeholders who also interact direct with children, with pupils as well. So there are some companies, but only non-profit making companies, I insist on that. They are, foundations are welcome if they have some training programs to develop on digital education with us, yes. I mean,
I'll pass the mic to Karina, please, but just to end by saying that, if we're all using Facebook and we're all using Google or whichever platform, then they really should be in the room when we discuss these things. They're offering services, giving you choices, which they should discuss. We all have a responsibility, and I think that's something to think about in terms of including those people. If we use their services, we should talk with them, and they should be in that discussion, I think. So, Karina, from a political perspective, knowing how governments work in Strasbourg, in the Council of Europe, knowing that there are many different media literacy initiatives happening in different parts of the work, is it a political priority? How do you see it from the viewpoint of Moldova too? What's your political take on this area of work?
Hello to everybody. In fact, I think when we are talking about internet, we need to take into consideration few elements. And in particular, a few years ago, everybody was talking about the access to the internet. Even my own country is one on the top 10 countries of the fastest access to the internet, even in the public spaces, including in the parks. So when we was promoting access to the internet, just now we came to the moment talking about how to use the internet. So in this field, we had quite very active civil society that created a platform, online platform for the parents and children named siguronline.md, saferinternet.md. And in fact, we had as well a few projects with the Council of Europe and EU in the framework of the Cooperation Council for Eastern Partnership countries on digital agenda, and it was promoted few videos and booklets how to use it. And at the same time, we are used to talk about how we can use the internet in the framework of the development of the country or the region. So it's really very complex, and we don't need just the government, just the private, but as well civil society. But at the same time, regional and international partners. So it's very, very complex because we are seeing that every organization has a lot of tools. But we have arrived at the moment when we are talking more and more about coordination. So I think the recent aspects towards propaganda, fake news, political movements, we has approach to the moment of coordinating between us at the national, regional, and international level, and to see how we can put all the tools that we have to be more efficient, because we have everything apparently, but it's just the communication and how to put this to work. So I think even with all the developments of at the experts level. So it's really important how we are communicating at the experts level in order to attract more and more the high level, in order to support all the aspects. And it's true, nowadays digital education and in general, 20 years ago it was in a vogue top topics human rights education. So right now we are talking about internet education. And I'm asking myself that Minister of Education from everywhere in this world are a little bit stressed because they understand that they need to modify the curricula. My question is a little bit more practical. Shall we change the entire curricula, or we can introduce in fact the elements from internet literacy on the vertical and horizontal education? So, and it's true, we need to take into account the new generation, the children, but we need to take into account the entire societies with adults, with elderly, that are used to use the internet, but they want to be safe. And here as well, we was talking about American-based companies, Facebook, Yahoo, Twitter, but we need to take into account other internet companies that should be invited as well at our more entire discussions. So thank you.
Thank you, thank you. And the point about access is a good one, because I know that when we talk about internet governance, we talk a lot about pushing the billions online, push them online, without any sort of educational literacy attached to the words access. So I find it very strange that you want billions more to go online, but are they actually are they ready to actually navigate and to make the choices that we're talking about? So it's rather ironic, but yes?
Additional element. At the Council of Europe level, we are talking about the guidelines, how we can vote online, electronic vote. Yep. So this is definitely politically how our infrastructure has developed. Are we enough skilled to vote electronically? Or it's step by step, we want to digitalize our existence, but in fact, going towards digitalization, we need definitely skills.
And going further, maybe I'll just throw that out there. For every policy in the future which involves the internet, maybe there should be a de facto question of what is the education and literacy for that policy. Otherwise, how do you implement that policy effectively? And as regards education and curricula, look no further than your colleague from Finland next to you, because they just, if I'm wrong, I don't know, tell me, Kimmo, that the curriculum in Finland has changed not that long ago to accommodate the new competency needs. Yeah, so we can talk about that. We have a speaker from the floor, Marie Martial from the Diplo Foundation, and then we'll come to Stephen, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Maybe the point fitted better in the first part of the conversation, so I'm going to mess up your moderation a little bit. But the point is related to the fact that I think that fake news had a very detrimental effect on the fact that we were almost getting to the point in which we were having a serious discussion about algorithms, which I think it's a very important problem related to literacy, related to transparency, related to governance, which I think it's even more fundamental because fake news, somehow they're out there and they can be confronted, whereas when something gets filtered by bubbles and algorithms, it doesn't exist into the world. You cannot even confront it. You cannot even question it. So the fact that in EuroDIG, for instance, last EuroDIG, we had a very interesting session on algorithms, and it received much more attention than in this particular meeting. So I think that, yes, fake news is really important, but we should not be distracted from the fact that even real news can be pushed down and that do not exist into the world. And that is very serious. And I think it is related to the fact how platforms see themselves in this equation. So we had a very interesting meeting in Brazil with Facebook. It was the week in which we were having our elections and the week in which they were conducting that experiment on trying to see how news would affect the mood of people. So they were somehow tweaking the algorithm to see how that would affect the mood of people. And it was our week of elections. So for us, it was 1 + 1 = 2. You can have an effect here, guys. And what they said is that we are just a platform. We do not have to do with elections or anything. We are just providing you a service. And we want you to feel good when you go into the platform. We want you to see things that bring you pleasure, that make you happy, that reinforce the positive mood of your day. And if you don't like that we're doing that, then you can step out and go somewhere else. But the whole notion that you will stay there because you're feeling good and seeing nice things just shows that the system is built for you to be locked in. And the way that they see themselves as just providing a service and not having anything to do with media or content or anything, I think this is really serious and needs to be discussed with them. And they have promoted so many interesting campaigns on birthdays, for instance. This is very viral in Brazil. Everyone who is having a birthday, they have promoted a video that creates pictures with your best friends and your good moments of the year and to celebrate your anniversary. Why don't they create something like this to educate people on fake news, for instance? Or how do they don't give prominency to campaigns that are being developed by UNESCO or something else? Google does the same. So I think that this collaboration, platforms can do a lot to give visibility to information that is educational and has public value too.
Thank you very much. Actually, the point of emotions and triggering emotions online with words and psychometric profiling with regard to recent elections is something, I don't know whether literacy can resolve those things, which actually affect something inside of you. We have Stephen, and we also have someone on remote participation. At that point, we will close, and we'll go to the last block, which is the way forward. So, Stephen, please.
Yeah, I'll go quickly here. I think it's true over the last few months we have seen some movement from the internet companies to react. Maybe it's completely insufficient, but they've noticed at least there's a political need to do it. And I think actually looking at how effective what they're doing is going to be interesting. I know they've got some clever people in there. They're not necessarily evil. So actually seeing what they do, learning from it, but being honest about ourselves, about, well, is this profit driven or not? That's where the literacy side is going to come in. The point I was going to make is that, I don't know, it's the point that you made about people coming online for the first time and using that opportunity, really trying to hardwire literacy into access. Library stats, 7 million people a year in Europe go online for the first time in a library. It's a fantastic opportunity to teach literacy. When you're building your fiber connections out to the villages, probably more of an issue in the developing world, but it happens in Europe as well. Again, it's an opportunity to give literacy. It's an opportunity to really hardwire things in. At the same time, sort of slightly caution against the idea that we shouldn't be giving people access until they're educated, because we sort of used that argument about democracy in the 19th century, and that's out of fashion now. So I think the learning by doing approach there is the best way. I don't know, we shouldn't necessarily hold ourselves back.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a good point. Remote participation, who's online? And of course, the room as well, if you have comments, please.
Can you hear me?
No, I don't know.
Probably.
Yeah, it's on.
Okay, now it is. Well, we have a question from Zakir Syed, that is an ICANN fellow and independent IG consultant and trainer. The question is, the significance of internet literacy varies from region to region. For example, in Africa, where too many are not connected to the internet, internet literacy will mainly be around to the how to use internet, how to go online, how to send an email, etc. But in more advanced societies, where the internet penetration level is comparatively very high, internet literacy will mainly mean how to be secure on the internet, how to consider privacy when online, etc., etc. How do you, as expert in critical internet literacy, look into this dimension? This was the question.
Okay. Thank you very much. I don't know whether anybody of the panel wants to come in on that, time to digest it, or whether you want it repeated for that matter. Anybody want to reply? Do you want to? Did you get that? Did you get the point that was made by the? Could you repeat it, please?
Yeah, sure.
Sorry.
Again, the significance of internet literacy varies from region to region. For example, in Africa, where too many are not connected to the internet, internet literacy will mainly be around the how to use internet, how to go online, how to send an email, etc. But in more advanced societies, where the internet penetration level is comparatively very high, internet literacy will mainly mean how to be secure on the internet, how to consider privacy when online, etc., etc. How do you, as experts in critical internet literacy, look into this dimension? So the differences among the regions.
Okay, thank you. So the panel, please. I think it depends whether you come from a developing country or a developed country, or where there's a low level of access or a high level of access or penetration. I mean, does literacy change shape and form, but does it become deeper with more access and more use of the internet? Anybody want to respond? Karina, Pascal, and Rachel, please.
As I said, in fact, for Europe, but worldwide, first of all, we're talking about access to the internet. So, of course, there are particular aspects how we need to have this access to the internet. And time by time, step by step, we are talking already about how to use the internet. So there are two different perspectives, a little bit different, and I think through the different programs, there are particular steps how to approach at the national level. Definitely, it's about national, regional, international level, the differences, what we are doing in some countries and what we are doing in the different countries, because there are different level of access to the internet. And definitely in the towns, countries where there is no yet access, you need to give the knowledges, elementary knowledges, how to use the internet. And where you have free access in the public space, for example, of course you need to talk about the rules, how to keep operations safer, or something like that.
Okay, thank you. Pascal, please.
Maybe if it can help to answer this question. For instance, data protection authorities have created an international working group to promote and to share experience. And in this international working group, there are some 50 authorities, and there are some who are more advanced in new methodology and other less advanced. We have so a mixture of experience between Africa, who learn from each other. For some who are interested in that, we have Burkina Faso, in our group, the Senegal, we have also the Mali, other groups who are interested in joining us, also asking questions. And for instance, our colleagues from Canada, from France, from Spain, we share our own content, resources, tutorials, videos, ready-to-use kits. It is at the disposal of others. We have created a website, a common online website library, thanks to the European Commission. It is open to all data protection for the moment worldwide. And in this library, online library, the platform based on CircaBC, we upload videos, comics, so all these kinds of material resources that can contribute to help each other according to the level of development you are in your country. And for instance, we also in France, we think some proposals from Canada might be interesting to our culture as well. So this is a sharing of that database, and this is for us a good way to help according to the level of development of pedagogy according to the countries.
Thank you very much. Rachel, quickly as we go to the next segment?
Yeah, quickly, I just wanted to say that I think if the premise of the question is that in parts of the global south, there's less potential for advanced, and just to point out that I think there are digital divides on many different levels, and so just the access to physical infrastructure is one kind, but then socioeconomic digital divides, or the way that people use the internet once they have access, if they use it for career development or just for Facebook. And and that can also exist in Europe, these sorts of divides. And I'm also thinking that in many developing countries, zero rating has become quite widespread. And so when people are first accessing the internet, it may just be to Facebook and WhatsApp or Wikipedia, and the type of experience and also the way that they learn about critical internet literacies. And that's even more reason to work with these big platforms. And I know that Google, and I believe also Facebook, has worked, now is developing some kind of media and information literacy program, and has sought expertise of various bodies. And I think it's just important that we ensure that they, in these programs, they convey the values of critical internet and media and information literacies, and not to sort of skew the information in a way that presents their company in a very positive light to the detriment of the individual user. And also just one last thing, that it is important to adapt content to local contexts, and of course to translate into different languages, multilingualism. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, please, Kimmo, please. We're on to our last segment now, so almost.
Just briefly, to me, this literacy that we are talking about is a vast concept, and I see it as a crucial, critical part for being able to exercise one's citizenship effectively. So it has nothing or very little to do with the internet as a technical infrastructure. So perhaps what we are talking about is not critical internet literacy, because what we are referring to is the content and services that are available through internet. So maybe it is actually critical literacy relating to something else than internet.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to say that we're going to come to the next segment now, the last segment, looking forward. But I would just say, I'm looking at Indrek in the sense that listening to Simkut yesterday in his keynote speech, and just how advanced Estonia is with regard to so many services online, that presupposes that Estonian people must be super literate to be able to manage and to understand and use those services with great trust. I mean, the education literacy must be quite powerful to I'm smiling, to really embrace all of those new services, because I guess some services are no longer offline but only online. Do you have anything to say on that before we go to the looking forward?
Yeah, there is a lot of mysterious going on there. Actually, the surveys demonstrate that Estonian kids are not that literate at all, and so are the parents. It's just there is this technical skill of learning the e-governance services, which is good. But when it comes to filtering out what is good, useful, understanding how the services work, what is good for them, etc., there is a long way to go, and this is an interesting discrepancy.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. The mic is still there for you guys in the room, so please come up. Or you have a comment, please? Yes?
Yes, hi. This is Esmeralda Moscatelli from IFLA. And I just had a thought or a comment, and how whenever we talk about literacy, we have to think about some sort of double movement, somehow synchronic and diachronic at the same time. Because if we look at the horizontal, diachronic one, we have to think about the importance of listening, also exploring and building consensus to create capacity and to eventually lead to change. Because within this realm of communication, we have to be also aware that communication is not only about what we do daily, which is raising awareness and persuading and informing, but is also ultimately about change. So I see this as a double movement that we can daily fight our battle for informing people, but then we have to be able to also listen and build capacity to ultimately achieve change.
Okay. That's a very good point. Change is very important. I think we're all in change all the time. So we're now down to our last segment. We have 20 minutes left, of which I'd like to reserve 5 minutes for the rapporteur to wrap up. And we have Stephen to give a little bit of a look at the way forward. Then it's Yves Mathieu from Mission Publique. Then it's Christina Monti from the European Commission. And then we have Siobhan Montgomery from the Council of Europe. You have roughly about 2-3 minutes, if I can say, to look forward.
I'll try to take less.
Go. Thank
if
you.
I possibly can. So 3 points that I want to make in terms of the way forward from the library perspective. I think that the first is, we're talking about digital things, but the importance of a physical space is still important, a place where you can bring in all the relevant experts. A public-orientated space is important. I think there is the limit of using private sector resources all the time. There's clearly a bias built within this. Private sector resources, fine, but in context. So having this public-orientated space, focus on improving people's lives and making the change happen that Esmeralda mentioned. Second thing, it's the skills side. I think I totally get Rachel's point. I think we want to avoid creating literacy, where we spend half the time working out what sort of literacy we're talking about and what each things mean. I think, again, focusing it on outcomes, using the resources that are there, convincing the people who teach history and teach people about how you evaluate sources in history, convincing the people who teach information literacy, which has been around for longer than the internet. A lot of the skills are there. It's just a case of getting them into the right place and training up the relevant people, the librarians, the school teachers, the youth workers, anyone else who has access. The final point is almost getting our own houses in order, making sure that our own websites are good practice, making sure that we can show that when you come onto our website, you're not being tracked necessarily. You are secure, your data isn't being leaked all over the place. I think showing that good example is a really good way forwards, to be honest.
Thank you very much. Yves Mathieu, tell us the way forward for Mission Publique.
So the way forward I would like to propose you is to live like if we were in 2017. The way things are organized today is a bit like they were in 1780, in the beginning of the modern democracy. When we go from vote on paper to electronic vote, we keep the system of 1780. We don't change the system. But the citizens live in 2017, 2018. And it's important that we all together, we increase our democratic literacy, because it is the stake. The stake is not to consider that we are the expert and we need to train the citizens who are not the expert. We need to include the non-expert in the decision-making process, because the non-expert has an expertise. And if we do not mobilize the expertise of the non-expert, we will miss something. And we will continue to work in the former paradigm. But if we continue in 1780, it's not going to be possible. Things are going to go backward, not forward. So to go forward, I think we need to think forward. And so my proposition is to, as I said, to include the non-expert in the field of decision. And to do that, so concretely, my proposition is to organize a global citizen debate on the future of the internet, and to give the keys to the future of the internet to non-experts, and to trust lay citizen, day-to-day citizen, and to include in the governance forum and all the places where the future of the internet is being discussed, as it is a common good, to include the vision of the non-expert to the future of internet. And doing that, we're going to work on we will increase our democratic literacy, because the expert will understand the value of what the non-expert has to say, and the non-expert will understand that it's not enough to act as consumers of the decision of the governments, of the decision of the forum that decide how they shape the common goods, and that anybody today is part of the system. And it's important to give a strong signal that we need to go from a position of consumers and complainers to a position of co-actors. And this is my proposition for the way forward.
You make me think that when we talk about democratic literacy, that we should all have a literacy test before we vote in elections. Maybe that would have changed recent results, I don't know. Cristina Monti from the European Commission.
Thank you, Lee, and good afternoon, everyone. So I'm happy to share some perspectives on this issue. What I gather from today's discussion is that there is a huge need for skills, but at the same time, there are different needs. So people in general need to get ready for the future. But different people have different needs in different parts of the world. And that's why we also have such a variety of initiatives happening at many different levels. Today we heard a lot about the problems of fake news and these kind of issues. How can we help develop critical thinking? And indeed, on this specific aspect, we think that the most vulnerable groups are young people, but there is a need also to expand these skills. I was reading an article where we were saying that teenagers are very good at learning how to take the perfect selfie, but then what do they do with that? I mean, so this kind of thinking that needs to be, and awareness that needs to be developed. Parents are important and other stakeholders are important as well. And I can assure you that there are a lot of initiatives and projects that, for instance, the European Commission is supporting or financing. I have here a whole list which I will not go through, but this is for sure an important area. I would also like to mention another macro area where I think it's important to develop the appropriate skills, which is in the labor markets. We still don't know what skills will be required for the future, and this is a challenge. So how can you educate people for jobs that still do not exist? And already now, I just would like to mention some figures. 37% of the labor force lacks basic digital skills. And around 40% of enterprises looking to fill ICT specialist jobs say that they have difficulty in finding the right people. So also a lot of attention is now going to this area. Another macro area, as I tend to call this, is cyber security. So what skills do users need to protect themselves? And here there is an important role also for netizens. They need to be aware, for instance, that they need to do certain simple things like changing their passwords and so on. And this is what is called sometimes as digital hygiene. So also there is a lot of work to do. Another area could be also developing skills to better participate in internet governance discussions. And there is a project that I'm always talking about that, which is the Global Internet Policy Observatory, another tool. So what I would say is that there are many initiatives, and this is something that we should welcome. Of course, I agree that more coordination would be helpful, but at the same time, I don't see this as a big problem in the sense that there is a variety of needs that need to be taken care of. So the more initiatives, the better, so we can reach more and more people. At the same time, if we realize that we are just at the beginning of a digital revolution which has an impact on the economy, and the society, it's only normal that also educational systems will need to adapt, and this will require some time.
Thank you very much. Excellent. And those resources, I hope, if they're not already, along with other resources and mappings and initiatives, are on this wiki page that we have for this workshop. Maybe we can add them if they're not already there, so that they provide you with some references. That'd be good if you haven't already done so. Before we come to Siobhan, for your final remarks, it is quite rather messy. And actually, when you look at the way products are successful regarding, whether it be phones or whatever, often the ones which are most successful, the most simple. I wonder whether there's a correlation between the messiness and the effectiveness of what we're trying to achieve. If we make it simple, it can be different inside. But if it's simple, then maybe it's more effective. But how you make it simple, I don't know. Siobhan, some final words before we wrap up with Davina. Thank you.
Okay, I just want to talk about our platform exchange for digitization and culture. This was set up in 2014 to look at the impact of digitization on culture. We believe that culture has a strong role in the digital ecosystem. particularly in the field of critical internet literacy and lessening the digital gap. In fact, we've identified that the digital gap is not just about people not having access to digital equipment. It's also about people who have access to digital equipment and don't want to use it or are unable to use it. We've had, as I say, the critical internet literacy has been an underlying theme. And indeed, this was incorporated into our recommendation 2016-2 to member states. You may have seen it actually. I see that all the copies went on the Internet of Citizens. And this encourages cultural institutions or governments to encourage cultural institutions to get involved in digital literacy, such as organizing online courses and using innovative cultural digital programs. We found there was a need to encourage cultural institutions in this area. Some cultural institutions had already started digital archiving programs, but there was a need to encourage cultural institutions to be more inventive. And that's where our second platform took us, looking at innovative cultural programs. Our third platform, which was held here again in Tallinn with INDREC, looked at the opportunities and challenges of cultural big data. And from this, we've drafted a new recommendation, these policy guidelines for member states to the Council of Europe. And this looks at how we can encourage our citizens to understand what algorithms are about, what cultural big data is about, and how they can manage this cultural big data. We will soon be holding our fourth platform, which will focus on digital cultural tools for counteracting fake news and undemocratic ideologies, as well as the power of cross-disciplinary networks and how these can be used in this context. And that will be held in Karlsruhe. As I said before, I think it's very important that the public and private sector work together, of course, civil society too, and our platform enables this opportunity. So the way ahead is for our platform to continue and, like EuroDIG, to be a way where we can discuss the most recent challenges and opportunities for cultural institutions in the digital field.
Thank you very much, Siobhan. Okay, thank you to all the panelists. It's really a very good cross-section of views and of different initiatives. Just by looking at you, we have libraries, we have CNIL, which is data protection, we have a university, we have international governmental organizations, we have governments, we have education specialists. We have those looking to the future with consultations, global consultations. Already there's a vast array of different sectors, views there which have to be brought together. It's very complicated, isn't it, really? Davina, we're down to our last few minutes. We're down to our last 7 minutes. It's a tough one, but can you wrap it up? Can you tell us what we need to do before we leave in 7 minutes' time to the next session?
Actually, a lot of things came up, so it's going to be very difficult. And sorry if I botch your job, and I hope you get all the all your perspectives not represented. I'm going to try to do that. It's funny because I was telling myself, how am I going to organize all the things they're saying and not lose anything? So you'll have to look for that online when we have a full report. But turns out that the way I understand media literacy as a pedagogy, as a right, and as a project fits in everything that you've said. So I'm going to do it that way. Media literacy pedagogy, you've all said that, and you've all insisted on competences, on outcomes, on attitudes, on hygiene, you said. And this idea that we're dealing with something that is very malleable, and maybe media literacy is not the right word anymore, but who cares? I think we all know what we're talking about when we're talking about it. And it is about 21st century skills. And there's definitely, I've sensed a feeling that we have to move away from even the 18th century, as Yves would said. We have to transition to a new mindset. And for lack of a better word, this is the one we have, critical internet literacy, critical literacies in general. But what came out is that it's around information, deep at heart. and how it is used, and how information is power, and how information can be manipulated or can be empowering. And so as long as we concentrate on cultures of information, I think we have something very concrete to bring us all together. The idea that this information has to be reliable, transparent, open. I think there's a general consensus that this is what we want for us and for our children, and that this is maybe the common ground. So the pedagogy for that, critical, learning by doing, the idea of trial and error, the hands-on approach, the creative approach, that's what you've all been talking about. The fun and not just fear has come up often. So let's move in that direction. Let's be optimistic about what can be brought along for lifelong consequences. Negative point, training. Training is lagging behind. Teachers need training in data, etc. It's important. But training is perceived as being horizontal. I mean, we're learning as much from our peers as from our experts. And this is an important mindset also to acquire. Maybe less arrogance about who detains knowledge. So that's the pedagogy part. The social economic right. Boy, did you come up with a new set of rights. This is a very intense moment for rights. Soft rights, and that's probably one of the issues of critical literacy, is perceived as soft. And yet, I think we all agree that soft actually is quite hard. But so, to give a sample, to the socio-economic right to choose, to use or not to use, to be inscrutable, to have transparency, to consume, to safety, against hate speech, to privacy, to human rights. This is a whole new set of rights that we need. With this general idea, again, what is lagging behind may be human rights and how we make them concrete to people, not just abstract. A political project, it's around values more than technology, even though technology is recognized as very important, but it's about choosing how to use the technologies. It's a political project that is intergenerational, and the peers are not necessarily people your same age, but people with the same affinity and the same mindset. So maybe a different way of seeing peers. And the idea that it's a political project about governance. And here we have EuroDIG meets IGF meets MIL. We are talking about governance, multi-stakeholder. Definitely this is taking the school and the classroom out of the premises of the concrete buildings. We have all the stakeholders here, the libraries, governments, the universities, not the private sector, which everybody has noticed as being absent, though not inactive. But the private sector is doing MIL on its own initiative and with its own agenda, and maybe we should bring them around into a closer discussion with us, and bring them to realize that they're not just a neutral service. They're not neutral, even if they would like to. So that's what we get with very good, lots of good practices. We have them, the Collective for Digital Education, Gap Mail, etc., etc. Totally new actors that are helping us see it differently. Regulatory authorities that are not being authoritarian, etc., etc. It's an interesting world where we're in. The solutions, same thing, and I'm going to be short, but it's their fault. They give a lot of solutions. For pedagogy, so learning by doing spaces, and they have to be in real life and online, and we need more of them to protect young people. Modify the curriculum, haha, that's a tough one. Bridging the gap, and the gaps that are in development, and we, in the north, we have our south, just as well. But the recognition that we have differentiated needs, north and south, and publics that are different. The idea that we have now recommendations, like the one on the Internet of Citizens, on big data, seeing culture in a different way, contributing to culture in a different way. Pedagogy could be about that. The political project, partnerships, again and again and again, including and especially with the private sector, the digital intermediaries, where are they? And more coordination among all these actors. coordination, inter-ministerial, inter-regulatory, inter-educational, whatever. But coordination is key and is a challenge. It's a challenge not just for citizenship and mail as and schools as citizenship, but also as employability. And I think that's something that we don't take into account enough in mail. So that's something for us to take away. And as a right, when we can see the emergence of these platforms that can be spaces for negotiations and for deliberation, very horizontal, that's a plus. And making people understand complexity. And I like what Yves said about the fact that we have two emergent and urgent transition, the transition to the digital, the transition to the climate change. They should converge. We should fight in a very coordinated way to push these issues and give lessons for a desirable future, the desirable future that we want. So they should lead us eventually to something even bigger than mail that is called democracy literacy. I think we are all in favor of this. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Davina. Okay, we're out of time. I'd like to thank you all for coming to this and staying, because you've all stayed. That's really cool. I can see that most of you have just sat there. Hopefully you've learned. I've learned a lot. I'd like to thank you all for coming. The session is closed. Thank you.